Hello and welcome to this episode of 20 Minute Tims. This is a podcast recorded for patrons getting their serious questions for real in. And I'm your host, Jamie, and I'm joined by Stephen.
What's happening?
And Martin Melly.
Yes.
Very helpfully this week, the names, because we're recording this remotely, are right below us. And they're going to stay there. So people, because we still get messages, Stephen, from people on X, formerly Twitter. Some great stuff on there, to quote you. We still get messages from people saying, what's it they say? Just first time seeing you on YouTube, putting faces to the names, you don't look like what I think you look like. And see, instead of saying that, what I want people to say is things like, I thought Melly looked more like Stephen, and I thought Stephen would look more like Melly. You know, give us a wee descriptor about what you think we look like based on the voice.
Raging as well. Why couldn't they have seen us 10 years ago when we started this, when we were all a lot younger, younger and more innocent back then? They're first catching us at this stage. Absolutely ridiculous.
When we all had a lot more hair, all three of us, and less
less
grey.
in some ways, I suppose, as well. Yeah.
And less grey. So what we do with this podcast on international breaks is it is quite boring and there's no Celtic. We put the call out to our patrons, and if you want involved in this, if you're catching this later on the flagship feed, patreon.com/20minutetims, you've heard of it by now. Links are in every bio, and you can get extra podcasts, videos, writing, and you can join in on things like this. We've reached out to our patrons for serious questions for real about Celtic and football and all things like that. Melly, it's always interesting when the patrons get to set the agenda. It's one of the perks, but it's an interesting time because Celtic are absolutely flying at the moment, but also the January transfer window is just starting to appear over the horizon. So while things are going well, I can tell by the questions and I can tell by some of the interactions you see on social media, people are starting to go, yeah, things are going well, but how do we improve this? People are starting to rub their hands at the prospect of getting reinforcements in very soon.
Yeah, I think it's when you get to Halloween, gets out the way, you know what it's like in the shops. You start thinking about Christmas. But for Celtic fans and football fans, that quickly turns to, because we see it in the Discord, it's been inactive for a while, but there are a lot more wee questions are popping up in the transfer thread where you're thinking, who could we get, or who's in for the Kuhn and all that. So it's a favourite time of the year, isn't it, when your team are getting linked with players, man?
It's the most wonderful time of the year, Stephen.
It's true what they say. It gets earlier and earlier every year. That transfer window fever grips right just around Halloween. It's absolutely ridiculous. What I've noticed, though, is that we are now in the third international break of the season, and there's nothing better when you're only 12 games into a regular season or whatever it is to get that out of the way and get another international break in there. But I've noticed have you picked up any of a growing, I feel, Mandela effect out there? Because I've seen a lot more people this time around being like, I can't believe we've got a third international break. But it's the same every year. We've always got this. But I feel like more and more this year people are like, this is ridiculous. I can't believe we've got a third international break. So maybe, hopefully, the fight back begins now and we can get rid of this.
No, that's just the modern world. It's social media. You can just go out and say whatever you want, because I have seen loads of that third international break. They need to stop this. There's too many games for players and all that. Meanwhile, actual proper journalists are going, it's been like this for a decade. Everything's the same. And although actual proper journalists aren't always the answer, because obviously England international team have had a lot of pullouts. And I saw one journalist, I think he was from The Sun, this is the fault of Thomas Tuchel. The guy's not even in the job yet, and he's already getting the blame for England player Jack Grealish pulling out of the squad.
Jeez,
I know, the most poisoned of all chalices. I know it's a bit of an old news just now, but I do kind of disagree slightly with foreigners taking international jobs, international management jobs, and this is not me going down one of my little woke jokes, but I do think that, see, if you're going to accept international football for the frankly quite silly premise that it is, and that all the players have to have some genealogical tie to the country that they're competing for, if you're going to accept that for what it is, and I happen to quite like international football, I think there's something quite quaint about it, getting all the guys from one country to go and play the other country, and all that. I like it. I don't know why managers and even coaches, but particularly, should be exempt. See, if you're going to have international football for the idiosyncratic way of deciding who gets to play for who, you can't just draft in a German then to coach the English team. That they need to include the managers and probably even coaches, to be honest, in that.
I agree with that broadly speaking. However, I would say that it should be applied on a tier basis. Now, if you are a developing country, so for example, African nations, South American nations, nations who don't really have a strong FA or coaching setup really to speak of, I think that's okay for you to go out and get like a French or Portuguese coach or something like that to sort of manage your up and coming, your developing nations football team. I think that's all right.
You could
But
apply
England-
for special dispensations.
Yeah, I think
England
that's
are tripping over
absolutely fine.
themselves with football managers.
Exactly. I mean, they've got probably
Big
the
Sam.
most the most well resourced coaching setup in the entire. They prided themselves on this FA like sort of progression course, and even one of them eventually got into the job, Gareth Southgate, and then Lee Carsley was there as well. So to just rip that all up and go out and get the best manager on the market is faintly ridiculous. So I do broadly agree with it, but I would leave it open to, like, I mean, Thailand had Sven-Goran Eriksson and all. I wouldn't like to get away with those. They do away with those wee quirks we see on occasion, but I think for you being a top 10 or 20 or even 30 level nation in the FIFA standings and going out and getting a foreign coach, I think is utter woke nonsense, as we like to say around here. Are we getting Brexit done or what? I suppose is my question.
So that's the rule, Melly. If you really need to be appointing a manager from your own nation, and if you're a young up and coming nation or an up and coming nation without perhaps the football infrastructure or the coaches, the number of coaches available to you, then you can apply to Stephen for special dispensation.
Correct, yeah.
And he'll decide whether or not he likes it. You buying this?
That's fair enough, innit? I like how he goes, that should be the case, apart from the weird nations. Just getting it in there, that's fine. I agree with it.
I agree with that.
Altruism.
It's going to be difficult for certain nationalities to get managers in, but I think it's gone too far now, isn't it? It would be difficult to start implement it unless they started it now and sort of phased it in. But I think it should be the nationality. You need to be the nationality coach of the national team.
So a little bit of housekeeping, by the way. I forgot to mention this at the top of the show. We are now running, for a limited time only, free trials on Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/20minutetims, we have 3 tiers there of varying levels of content, and you just pick what one you like the look of the most, and you'll get a 7-day free trial. You'll get to have a look at everything that's in the back catalogue, take your pick, some little podcasts here and there. I quite like the sound of that, I quite like the sound of that. Listen to the various things that we offer.
That's how we get you.
That's how we get you. We get you with a free trial, and we hope that you love it so much that you stay on board and you enjoy it for a long, long time, or you forget you've got it.
By the way, just to point out that there are now, I think, over 2,500 people in there. So that number of people can't be wrong. They simply cannot be wrong. So get involved. We are party rocking in there all week long, as the kids love to say these days. So we're on the Discord all day long as well, chatting all things. So it's a great community we've built in there. Very proud of it.
So we reached out to the community. First up is Jordan. Now, apologies, this is not good camera work, but I'm going to have to keep looking away because I've got the questions written down to my right here. And Jordan's question is, rumours the Adidas deal is getting extended and we're becoming an elite team. The Fugly Dafabet deal is also due to end this season, thankfully. Which classic football sponsor would you like to see replace Dafabet? I'd love to see Carlsberg or Pirelli as the main shirt sponsor with Adidas. I'd even take Bevy.com from Hibs. Free plug for Bevy.com. Honestly, you'd be better off sponsoring 20 Minute Tims with a name like Bevy.com. Martin Melly.
Oh, I think for me, growing up, it was C.R. Smith with Celtic. So I don't know if I think they're still going, aren't they? I don't know if they are big enough these days to be doing that. But the one that always sticks out for me would be Nintendo on the Fiorentina
I was going to say that.
So that's a classic there.
Remember
So
Dreamcast on the Arsenal shirt?
that was nice as well, yeah.
Yeah, there was Sega, and then there was specifically Dreamcast for Arsenal around about maybe turn of the century. That was a classic. So you beat me to it. I was going to say Nintendo. It's all those kind of classic Italian ones. Like
who were they?
Nintendo,
Fiorentina,
that was. And then there was Sony for Juventus for a bit as well.
For AC
Opel, of course, yeah. Pirelli was Inter Milan for decades, I think, wasn't it? So all those kind of classic ones.
Finished, hasn't it?
Yeah, that's right, yeah. So I'm trying to think of some of the kind of quaint ones from England back in the day as well. There would be like Amstrad Amstrad and Coors, Labatt.
Coors,
I was about
Yeah.
to say, could we not get
yeah.
one of the? Could we not get a really obscure? Remember, Celtic used to have to change their sponsor when they went on like these American tours.
Yeah.
We had Coors Light, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So
Carlin, wasn't it?
could we get some really specifically internet ones for Celtic as well, like
Dogecoin.
Dogecoin, Manscaped would be good.
OnlyFans.
Welcome back anytime, lads. OnlyFans. Can we tie that in with the fans somehow? There's probably marketing angles there somehow.
It's probably less tawdry than Daffabit. Do you know
Aye.
you can probably point to who owns OnlyFans, whereas it's quite, I think, opaque about who owns the likes of Daffabit. And we need to be
Apparently
careful,
so.
but we need to be careful what we're talking about here because they have much more money than us, and they'll sue poor old 20-minute Tims into the ground. But I think Daffabit were one of these companies that just sort of sprung out of the Asian betting market that no one could really, you can't find out who owns them. You don't know an awful lot. I've never placed a bet with Daffabet, and I think by the looks of it, the sponsor, just by looks wise, the sponsor is really ugly and ruins every Celtic shirt it's been on. Melly, what have you made of the Adidas offering for Celtic though? Do you think they're due to get their contract extended? I think they've had some really patchy strips for us.
Yeah, just thinking there when you were talking, remember Celtic and Rangers had the same shirt sponsor, man. I hated that so much, man. But we are not half of anything, so we'll never do that again, which I'm happy about. Yeah, the Adidas ones, I've always been an Adidas man, so I was really excited when they came in. I thought it was going to be brilliant, but even the tracksuits and the apparel we get with them, I don't think a lot of it's been up to what I thought it would be. Like I see other ones like Arsenal have got this cracking strip out there now from Adidas, and I just don't see us getting anywhere near that. I think the only one cracker we've had was last season's the green and white
centenary
hooped
sort
one.
of,
Yeah, I think that's
the
a
commemorative
cracker.
one rather.
Yeah, but the other two strips that we've just brought out and never worn, I've not been a fan of them at all. Over time, I probably think New Balance has had better kits. There's been a few Adidas ones that have been good, but to be honest, I thought it would be much better. If looking back on it now, if the deal was to end, I'd probably be slightly disappointed by what they've served up.
I'd have to agree with Melly there, Stephen, because there's a couple of things that I've not been too happy with the Adidas deal. I thought the first 3 strips we got from the cuss season, I thought that the home strip was just very plain and quite bland. I didn't think it was necessarily bad, but it was uninspired for the first Adidas one out the traps. I wasn't particularly happy with it. Then they had the sort of Love Street sort of replica strip, which I thought was a beautiful colour of green, but I thought there was elements of the strip that they kind of ruined. And then the appearance of the random massive shamrock or clover on the black away strip, I just thought was a mess. Then you move into the second season, and again the home strip I thought was rubbish. It was hoops again with just like little pinstripes above them this time. It's almost indistinguishable from their first one. Again, dark green away, which was really nice, but they had that strange clover on it. And then they had the strip that most people will probably forget about, the white, remember the pink and green
badge
with a
and that.
pinstripe. They had everything centred for some peculiar reason. I thought that was really, really disappointing as a kit.
I've got quite fond memories of that because it reminds me of getting back to Celtic Park in the first place. That was massive when we started first getting let back in. So early in Ange's first season, there was a time where they opened up Celtic Park to maybe 5,000 or 9,000, I think, in the first game was at Midtjylland. I remember that being massive at the time. A lot of people had bought it and I was surrounded by people wearing that. So I've got kind of misty-eyed memories of that. But as a garment itself, no, it's probably no idea. It could have been good. See if it was like normally structured with like a badge on the left and Adidas there and like the sponsor across the middle. It could have been fine, but I don't know why they went for that weird sort of layout of the badge halfway down the chest. Very odd.
We went into the sort of a more designery home kit, which was obviously last season's home kit, which I loved, and then they had the black and green away kit, which I loved, and then they had the sort of silver and yellow, which I thought was another miss, and then we had the Celtic Da polo shirt thing with the enormous clover. That clover's getting bigger and bigger. that was a miss. Sorry, that was the season before last. I'm sorry, I'm incorrect. That was season before last. And then I thought all of the strips last season were rubbish. I thought the black away, the inspired by Glasgow's music scene was rubbish. I thought the home kit was rubbish. So there's just been, for me, too many Adidas misses. And another big bugbear of mine with Adidas, and there's 3 of them, is one, having to tie every strip to some spurious window or music scene or the terraces or something.
Ones.
Too many window things. And then third and foremost, Stephen, they just keep bringing out
Third and foremost.
Third and foremost, is that what I said? Last, not least, okay? They keep bringing out like shirts we don't ever wear, and it's just like relentless marketing tat, like connect with your Irish heritage, and it's some strip that they market for all of a week, so they don't even believe in the product themselves. Strips like Melly said, the commemorative one, which as I understand it, the plan was to maybe wear that during the cup final had we made it, but Celtic balls up the paperwork or some such. But there's too many strips we don't wear. They just need to narrow their offering to stuff that slaps and things that people actually want to buy, and crucially stuff that if they're bringing out a strip, the team have to wear it.
Well, yeah, do better, I suppose, is the overall philosophy here. They're still, to my knowledge, we still haven't worn that third one from this season, the kind of camouflage green thing. I can't really picture it on the team, which is getting more and more frequent these days, these third strips that are never worn, simply. I didn't mind that grey one, the sort of pale grey thing with the
I can
luminous
imagine
yellow.
I didn't mind that. Yeah, I didn't mind that. I could picture Aaron Moy in that in the St Mirren game that we lost. But other than that, no strong feelings on Adidas. Hopefully we just get some good kits going forward.
Nico, he says, I know it's been talked about to death, but what are your thoughts about Scottish League reconstruction and a move away from playing the Orcs 4 to 6 times a year? I think for the benefit of Celtic, especially in Europe, and Scottish football, increasing the size and quality of the league is essential. It would be a painful few years to get it up and running, but I think it would massively help us to perform in Europe more consistently. TED Talk finished, said Nico Melly.
Keep going back and forth with this because he said an increase in quality. I'm not sure that's the case. Sometimes with the way Scottish football clubs are run, as we see with Hearts, good season last season, they're bottom of the league this season. There's not a lot of teams that sustain it, so it would be looking at historical teams and wanting them up, but there will be a couple of teams like Falkirk seem to be doing really well. They've went up and they're looking to go up again, but again they've got a plastic pitch, so I don't want that anywhere near the top league. Ayr United are near the top despite not really doing anything the last few years. Raith Rovers as well. I'm not sure these clubs have got the stadiums, the capacity, the finances to come up and compete, so I just don't know if it's... I think we've got most of our big teams in the league right now. I don't know if bringing more teams will do anything with that. I think we need to look at other teams. I'm all for giving it a bash. Do I think it will be successful? No, I don't. I just think there's always this, if we have extra teams in it, we'll be able to play younger players. I don't think that's going to be the case at all.
Stephen, I'm all for it. I think a refresh is needed, and I think as time goes on, this league format is going to become more and more stale. Now, how that benefits Celtic in Europe, as Nico was suggesting, I'm not too sure. I just think the quality of teams just is not there to have any meaningful impact on Celtic. But I think these teams getting to play Celtic and having more meaningful games for them around teams that they can beat, just like the new Champions League format, more meaningful games, more chances to pick up points, more goals likely to be scored. No plastic pitches, giving away fans that want the tickets the ability to buy the tickets and bringing more revenue into your club. I think all that will really revitalise the Scottish League. And I've got to be honest, I think the way things are heading, the way because Rangers they're rubbish with money. Rangers they can't be trusted with their own money. The way it's heading now, Rangers are either going to go bust again or operate in such a low level that the Glasgow Derby itself is going to be just another match, and it's not going to be very, very meaningful in terms of footballing competition. Celtic are going to roll over Rangers 9 times out of 10. We have been doing anyway, but I think that's going to get more frequent the way that Rangers seem to be conducting their business. So for the sake of the league, I think we need a refresh. We need more teams in. We need more derbies. We need bigger teams. Is such a strange thing to say in the terms of Scottish football, because you're like, we need these big teams in, and then you watch their games and they're getting 500, 600, 700 fans sometimes. But that's just the reality of playing football in Scotland. But I think some of these fans, if they were in the Premier League, I think that the fans would be encouraged to come back. I think generally fans would be encouraged to come back with a new, interesting and refreshed league format. So I was previously against it, but the way things have been for the last couple of years, I do think, and also seen the success of the revamped Champions League, I think that league reconstruction is probably worth exploring.
For me, it's too much of a sacrifice for very little gain. I don't see the road to success that has been laid out in front of me here, because I think you can't have it always. You could say that you need more teams in it and more involvement for other teams, but ultimately what you'd be doing is flooding the league with potentially part-time teams and sacrificing at the very top of that the biggest game in the country, regardless of whether it's a sporting, it's a really tightly contested battle anymore on the pitch. I still think it's by far the biggest selling point that Scottish football has by a long, long way. They need Celtic and Rangers games. So what we'd really be doing is we're telling Sky or whoever would like to purchase the rights for the game here is that we're going to do away with half of those, and we're going to bring in Greenock Morton and Falkirk and teams like that. I don't mean specifically them, but you know what I mean? The sort of decent to medium-sized clubs from around around Scotland that you could possibly find. I don't see it. I don't see how it benefits Celtic in any way. It could benefit Scottish football, but again, what you would be doing is diluting the quality quite a lot in the hope that maybe someday down the line something gets better. I don't see what to be perfectly honest. I don't mean to be like sort of dismissive or callous about it, because I think it would be interesting to restructure the league, but I think we are also, I'm aware that we're stuck with certain things that we can't afford to get rid of. I don't know how you sell the Scottish game at all with fewer Celtic versus Rangers games. As boring as it might be for the general public outside of Celtic and Rangers fans, inside Scotland that is, we just can't afford to lose it, and I don't think I can. I don't think I can make that sacrifice for the addition of, as I say, your Dunfermlines, your Falkirks and all that. I don't see where it leads, to be honest.
Could I interest you in the radical idea I've mentioned in the podcast since we started this once or twice, which always gets massively shot down, but could I interest you in Jamie's radical idea of zeroing the points? Could an American-style playoff system? Everyone plays each other once. You split the league in half, and the points get zeroed from that point on, and then it's you just go again. That gets you into the playoff of the top six and the playoff of the bottom six. Everyone starts again on 0 points, and then the real competition begins. Could I interest anyone in that?
No, you cannot. No.
Do you? Okay, fine. But my ideas are wasted on you guys, honestly. Michael asks, what's the priority position for January? Winger? Maybe left back, given the uncertainty around Greg Taylor and Vai. Stephen, I'll come to you first on this.
Yeah, I think both of those spring immediately to mind. I think that the left back problem is becoming a bit of a red flag. It's becoming a bit of a glaring issue for Celtic because of the ongoing situation with Greg Taylor's lack of contract for next season, and the fact that the only alternative is on loan. Now we do have Bernabei out on loan, and his loan must be up.
There's a question about him.
Oh, is there? Yeah. Right. So I'll park that for now. But at the moment, it could be a left back, because we don't want to get into January, at which point Greg Taylor is free to talk to other clubs, potentially even move in January, and there's nothing really sorted out for next season, because it's been a problem position for a long, long time. Not only just that, a lot of people don't rate Greg Taylor, but parking that aside entirely, it's just we've been weak in that area for a long time, regardless of Greg Taylor, because there's been no competition. This is the first time in a wee while that there has been viable competition in the form of in the form of Alex Valley. So I think that could be a priority. I think winger is most certainly, if not a priority, then it's something that probably should be looked at. With Yang having come on against RB Leipzig and looked okay, he could maybe be like a bit of an impact player at times. But
we've got so much patience for little Yang, don't we? We've got so much patience for the guy.
I don't think he's going to do much going forward, but what I mean is in the immediate future, right, I'm not that bothered about Yang getting the odd appearance here and there, because he can come on and make some kind of impact. I think Palmer's cooked. Yes.
If Nicholas Kuhn got a 6-week injury and couldn't play, would you be happy with Yang coming in for 6 weeks and think we'll be fine?
Don't you dare put that evil into the universe.
Do you think we'll be fine?
Beat that. No. I think,
so what's the point?
Could you get by with Forrest for a bit and maybe a bit of Yang? I really don't know, to be honest.
Come on, this is Celtic, Stephen. I'm getting Roy
Aye,
Keane
true.
on you here.
True. Palmer, I think, is done. I think he's cooked, as they say. So that leaves you with Maeda and Kuhn and Forrest, really. So I would say winger is certainly something that needs to be looked at, but left back. In fact, do you know what? Maybe even equally. I don't really want to sit in the fence, but those are two really good shouts for those positions.
We know how Celtic operate, don't we, Melly? If it's there's obviously something wrong with Greg Taylor's contract. He either wants to explore he wants to explore other opportunities, or we are not making him an offer that represents what he and his agent feel like his value to the squad is. Which that's football.
Was he 27 now as well?
Yeah.
I think he just recently turned 27, so it's getting to that time, isn't it?
Greg Taylor is a hugely influential player. He's I don't know if there's like a senior players group within the dressing room at Celtic. You expect there probably is. Greg Taylor's definitely part of it.
Oh, yeah.
So you would expect the offer that gets made to Greg Taylor is in and around the bigger money that people are getting. Now, maybe Celtic have looked at it and went, well, we don't think Greg Taylor's like that, and if he wants to move on, he wants to move on. But then my question is, why would we have the managers coming out telling everyone, including Greg Taylor, that we want to keep him, we love him, he's brilliant and all this sort of stuff? So it's becoming a bit of a strange situation as far as Greg Taylor goes. I know there are plenty of Celtic fans who would happily see Greg Taylor walk out the door, and that's fine, you're entitled to your opinion. I think every player comes and goes and Celtic just keeps motoring on. That's just the way it goes. But I'd be quite disappointed if we lost Greg Taylor, especially on a free transfer, because I think he's contributed a lot to the club lately, and I think he's a good player to have around. Vai is an interesting one. Barcelona seem to be wanting him back, but I don't think there is any doubt that whatever the situation with Greg Taylor, if he doesn't get his contract sorted by January, we probably will draw a line under it, because that's the way Celtic operate. If things aren't decided, we tend to draw a line under things and players end up leaving. And to be honest, I've not seen one player that's left Celtic under those circumstances and went anywhere good and has enjoyed his time away. Vai, we're obviously not going to buy him. Barcelona want him back. So it's a high priority position. We don't have one left back in the squad who could potentially be here in February. Both of them could leave. Melly, there's talk of KT coming back. Robertson at Liverpool has been on the record as saying that he wants to join Celtic at some point before he's all done. Would you take both of them? Do you think that's greedy?
End up in the same situation as Scotland have been in the last 5 years. Need to buy back Jack Hendry. We need to sign Grant Hanley. Porteous as well, just to accommodate these two left backs we can't fit into the team.
Even if Tierney or Robertson were to come in, we need somebody else. I cannot foresee Celtic going into next summer and being able to go out and get two good left backs when right now we've struggled for so long. The Greg Taylor situation is so strange for me. From the little I have heard, Greg Taylor is waiting for Celtic to give him a contract and nothing has come forward, which is very strange because we're dishing out 4 or 5 year deals all over the place. Greg Taylor, you'd probably make an argument that he deserves it more than most people.
He definitely deserves it. He definitely deserves the deal.
He's coming up to a point where he's going to be able to speak to other clubs. So I think if Taylor was given a contract, he'd sign it. I would love to see him get a contract. And I think even if he does, it's still a position we need to go out and get somebody. And I'm not saying Greg Taylor's a bad player. I'm not saying it's easy to go out and upgrade on him, as we say. But I think we've seen from the way Celtic have been recruiting recently that pace and power are massive in the game now, and that comes along with technique as well. The technique's sort of is a given, isn't it? But we need pace and power in there, and I think defences these days, even when we've seen the Leipzig lineup, you're like, these guys are all giants, man. And it's not a fault of Greg Taylor. He's a very good player, looked very good in that game, but I just think football's sort of moving that way. I'd love Greg Taylor to sign a new deal. I'd love us to get a left back. If we do get Tierney in, we'll definitely need Greg Taylor because there's going to be a lot of games he'll play. But for me in January, it's the winger that needs sorted, because I don't believe that Yang is ever going to make it for Celtic. Pretty much know that now Lewis Palmer is never going to make it after the Dundee performance, and Kuhn and Maeda are brilliant, but we need to get ready for probably the inevitable at some point with Kuhn if he keeps this up. But also we're Celtic, we're competing at many different levels, and the Champions League is where we want to be, so we can't rest on that. So you need 3 very good wingers for me, that you play 2 of them and 1 comes off the bench. We don't have that. We've swapped about Forrest, Yang and Palmer. So winger for me, left back second, and then come the summer a number 6.
See,
and the
just on-
goalkeeper will probably need as well.
Just on Kuhn, he won't. I don't think he'll keep this up all season.
No,
I
he
just,
won't. But even if he doesn't,
Exactly,
it's
yeah.
still ridiculous
I just
numbers.
no. Look, I saw some put out a tweet or a post on X. I'm just going to call it tweets for now on, right? Comparing his numbers this season to like something we did in the podcast. So they've obviously listened to the podcast and ran with it, this account, and they'd compared the numbers going back seasons after seasons, and he's surpassed. Even in some of these other wingers' best seasons, he's got over 50% of their goal contributions already.
Aye, in November,
It's frankly redonkulous that this guy's putting out the numbers that he is. Speaking of futures, Matteo Morgan, he says, where do you see Brendan Rodgers' future with Celtic? There's the chance of a treble and possibly last 16, and he's won. Sorry, I'm messing this up. He goes, there's the chance of a treble and a last 16, and he's won and seems to be doing it all with Europe. That's exactly how it's written down. With that harder to drop into the Europa League and go into a big run, will he leave on a high this year, or could he stay longer than his 3-year deal? I think Brendan wants a legacy here at Celtic. I really do. I think here we go. I don't think Brendan would have come back were it his intention to do a couple of years at Celtic and then go back down to, I don't know who would want him, an Aston Villa or a team of that level. Although Aston Villa are flying high at the moment. I just think, I think Stephen, he wants a bit of a legacy here, and he wants this. I think Brendan Rodgers, based on what he says, and you can decide how much of that you take with a pinch of salt, he wants to really push Celtic to see how far we can take this thing.
I suppose that's always, you wonder what the limiting factor is, though. As Matteo puts it, and as you possibly read it verbatim, I'm not sure. There was something about Europe in there, about last 16. And I suppose if Celtic go about their business just now, if Celtic continue the trajectory they're currently on in Europe, likely finish in the top 24. Now, we don't count our chickens on that. Some hard games to go, but they're doing well just now and looking good for a top 24 finish. That's not last 16, so that's last 24, isn't it? Well,
yeah.
Quite literally is. And then there's a playoff for the last 16. That's going to be very difficult as well. Very, very difficult. So you might find that doing that, and then we're back to the old pish about how I've not won a knockout tie after Christmas in Europe or something like that for 20 years. But Europe, it's a different format now. It's going to be very, very difficult to do so in the Champions League.
We can milk the Celtic make the Champions League after Celtic are still in the Champions League after Europe thing. We can milk that all we want.
Guaranteed until January. Yeah, after Europe. So what I'm getting at here is that if we do that, if we get to a knockout tie and are drawn against a very difficult team and perform admirably and go out, but then we win a treble as well, I suppose I wouldn't like to put words in his mouth, but is Matteo maybe driving at if that happens this season, is that as high as we can possibly go? Is that the pinnacle for Celtic now? A knockout tie in the Champions League and a domestic treble, is that as good as it gets? And does Brendan Rodgers maybe sense that? Because all managers, I suppose, they're never going to ever be better at this, because they're always going to back themselves to be able to do more and more. They wouldn't be in the job if they didn't have the mindset, the belief in themselves that they could do more. But managers are traditionally, historically, very poor at noticing when the good times are as good as they're going to get. And again, I don't blame them for that, because it's just part of the makeup of what makes them successful. So would Brendan Rodgers be within his rights to get to the end of this season with another domestic treble and a right good crack at the Champions League, and maybe think the only way is down from here? Is this as possible as it's going to get? Because how do you add to a Celtic legacy from that point on?
I'll tell you what you do. The prize isn't one time making the last 16 or last 24 and winning a treble. The prize is restoring Celtic's reputation on the European stage by restoring Celtic's reputation as not the European whipping boys, which the Champions League whipping boys, which we have been for a long time. We've been a bottom rung almost Champions League team for the longest time. And
Yeah.
the prize is restoring that reputation, building Celtic back up. He could make Celtic. Now, this is all speculation, of course. We kind of read Brendan Rodgers' thoughts, but you build Celtic back up to the team that aren't that in Europe, the team that people don't particularly want to draw in Europe anymore. I'm not saying you become a top team or a top 16 every single season, Melly, but what I'm saying is you become the team that are not only regularly appearing in the Champions League, but also not finishing dead last, getting absolutely spanked every time they roll into the tournament. And you with the reputation rebuilding there, you can then walk away and say, look, you guys were European nobodies, frankly, for the longest time. I came along and restored that reputation, and it's time for someone else to take it forward.
Yeah, I agree with that. Looking at it, it's different this time because we do have Brendan Rodgers as the manager, but it's a different Brendan Rodgers from when he first came. He'd been at Liverpool, he did a good job there, got let go, and then came to Celtic, built his reputation up again, then got a crack at it. Even if Brendan Rodgers wins a treble with Celtic and takes them to the last 16, do I see too many jobs down south that are going to be very appealing for him? I'm not sure I do. That the number of jobs he could take is dwindling by each club because of ties to other ones. He's already been there, and he will have
Age as well. He's
yeah. That's what's coming on.
I don't really how you define this, but he's a sort of he's like a second or third phase of manager, isn't he now? The new younger managers are coming through, the new guys, and Brendan's kind of in that David Moyes camp. I know Claudio Ranieri just ended up getting the job there at Roma, but that was under very specific circumstances about what length of contract they were prepared to offer and all that. But he's in that sort of mould, isn't he, Melly? The game is sort of finding new and exciting managers.
Well, to just illustrate that before we move on, I was actually shocked recently to find out that Ange Postecoglou is the oldest manager in the Premier League now. So that kind of paints that all that stuff about how he left at the wrong time, he should simply have waited for a better offer. It kind of paints that in a certain light, and it's probably completely rubbish. These guys, Brendan Rodgers isn't as old as Ange, clearly, but the point is, these teams are by and large not appointing guys in their late 50s and 60s anymore. It's all, that guy who's Amarim, who's just gone to Man United, is 39 years old. I think the Brighton one's even younger than that. He's significant. He's significantly younger than some of his own players. So that's the trend. That's the way it's going. So you're absolutely right about the windows closing for these guys.
And looking at it, he seems to me more content this time, where he knows. And he's came back to Celtic and he's talked about the structure and all that, how it's good. I don't think it is. I think he was talking nonsense there. I think there's a lot still to do at Celtic. And I'm looking at him working alongside other people. He could mould Celtic into what they need to be right now. Yes, we'll have success domestically. That's not enough. And with this new Champions League and having games in January, so that takes you up to February. If you get into that into that playoff place, that's 2 games into sort of February, March time. That's what you want, because a lot of times at Celtic, when we've been in the Champions League and went out early without getting into that Europa League stage, you're going from December right through at the end of the season with no European football. We're pretty much, if we can get into the Champions League, we're guaranteeing we're going to have European football right through to February at least. Then you could potentially have another 2 ties. I think that's massive for Celtic financially, but also that glamour, because sometimes we can go out, if you go out of a cup early and you don't win that League Cup and all you've got is the League of the Scottish Cup, it can seem like a long season, but having these big games on the horizon pretty much throughout the season is going to keep that sort of entertainment, but also that drive. And I think Celtic need to become a team that, like you say, get that reputation back, and that comes with doing everything underneath as well, getting the proper procedures in place, the proper people in place, and having this holistic approach to driving Celtic to becoming a Champions League team, because we can win the league domestically, we can have a bad season and then turn it round the following season. What we need is year on year appearing in the Champions League, and we've got Bruges coming up. They're a team that's been in the Champions League like 5 seasons in a row. That's what I want for Celtic, because that brings in the money. That means we can sell players on, regenerate it and start doing things properly. We're starting slowly now this season to do things properly. We need to keep that going. It can't just be that Brendan Rodgers, when he does leave, goes and everything falls apart. Just like when Ange left, everything fell apart. We need the procedures in place. And I think Rodgers is now looking at it and going, I could be Guardiola or Klopp of Celtic.
I think there's an attractive.
Aye.
Sorry, Steve, let me just cut in there. I think there's an attraction as well from Brendan Rodgers' point of view. And I know we've sort of drifted away from the question here a wee bit, but I think there's an attraction from Brendan Rodgers' point of view that if you can't beat the new up and coming managers who are slotted into already pretty well performing teams with all the infrastructure that Melly talks about, rather than being a club manager, you can sort of, or you could carve a niche for yourself as being a club builder, a reputation restorer. There will be plenty of clubs in England who have had glory years that are behind them, like Manchester United, for example. I'm just using them as an example of a club who if Brendan Rodgers achieved this reputation rebuilding at Celtic, like, I don't know, but let's use an example, maybe a Leeds or maybe a team who's fell behind the times a wee bit, would look at Brendan Rodgers and go, well, he went in there and they revamped their transfer system, he revamped their coaching system, he had a big say in their youth system, he got Celtic winning that league at a canter every single season, and they got them performing in Europe, and he was the central linchpin to all of that. And I think a couple of clubs who've let things slide and who want to recapture or rebuild themselves a wee bit, or who want to get to the point where they need to bring in, or they want to bring in a young up and coming coach, but there's just too much going on there. You could bring in a Brendan Rodgers and he would look, I'll get you to that point, and then he moves on, and then at that point, once Brendan's fixed it, a young coach comes in and takes them on and does the new thing.
Yeah, that's entirely possible. Of course, we're all just speculating here, but Brendan Rodgers has been around a long time now, and he has had a few of these jobs, and not all of them have been successful. So I don't want to get too carried away with what he does at Celtic is going to get him. I'm not particularly concerned with his next job. I suppose we're really talking about the legacy he creates here. I think we have to be, if I made Dick advocate it for a single second, I think there is a point of that was a good noise there.
You shocked me.
I think there is a point of diminishing returns that we have to be realistic about as well, because if he is here for, I think what made me sort of real about the Jurgen Klopp, Pep Guardiola thing, if he's here for like 7 or 8 years and he's winning the title at an absolute canter every time, there is a point at which where that becomes incredibly stale. And
I might just
job.
Interject here, because the next question from John Wales is, should we be looking at giving him a new contract? So you can maybe answer that while you're travelling down this path.
Yeah, well, I'd be up for that just now, but I think like when you're talking in the realms of 7-8 years, I'm talking about his reputation as well. I think like a similar conversation we had recently about how almost counterintuitively, the more goals Celtic score, the more criticism they get for having too much money and having too much of a budget and having too much of an advantage over their opposition. I think if it gets to the point where Brendan Rodgers is here for 7 years and has won 6 trebles in that time, it starts to look preposterous, and then actually kind of damages his reputation, because it will just look like he's an absolute flat track bully. Now,
if you're saying on one hand he's no getting a big job down there, does it matter how successful he is up here if that's not his aim?
No, but I think, yeah, I'm not talking about getting down to England or anything like that, but it will just start to look here like it's a total canter, and I don't think that'll be good for his overall coaching legacy.
It'll look like a bell curve. Is that what you're saying? That the success will build and build and build, and then eventually people go, well, actually, maybe it's not Brendan Rodgers doing this. Maybe it's just how easy it is being Celtic manager, and that'll.
Yeah, I'm not talking about him. I'm not talking about him getting a job in England. I'm talking about how people look back on the coaching career of Brendan Rodgers. If he spent most of his career absolutely cantering it in Scotland, it's not going to look all that great. And I think he makes that. I think that's important to Brendan Rodgers, what his reputation as a coach is. Now, of course, this is for him externally. We fold the Champions League into this conversation, and I think that's probably where it's at for him. I think I agree with the idea that he could hopefully make Celtic a more robust challenger in it every year. But we also have to be realistic and basically concede that will involve doing it with a different team every 2 years. And how long that can be sustained for, I'm not sure. Whether the coefficient can stand up to enough batterings from the likes of the other teams that allows us to qualify automatically for it every year, unsure about that as well. So I suppose the overall point I'm making is it's never a linear progression. There will be hits along the way, and sometimes it will take sort of dips and all that. So I try not to get too concerned with saying, oh, he'll be here for 5 or 6 and 7 years and it'll all be brilliant, because I think at a certain time the fans will become probably quite bored of that as well. I'm not talking about getting bored of success, but I'm talking about just that if it's just utterly relentless and all the other teams have fallen away, I think there will come a time where it has become a little bit stale, and we're wondering why we're paying a guy £3 million a year to, or probably more. Like, we're talking about giving him a new contract with this next question. If his wages go up, like, we're just absolutely cantering domestic football. So it will include the Champions League, and again, we'll have to. It's maybe less about Brendan Rodgers and more about the structure of the club going forward. Can the club be built in a certain way, as we've discussed, that can be geared towards Champions League success rather than just hoping a manager does it for us year upon year? So that's maybe more important, I think, than Brendan Rodgers.
We've got a couple of quick questions that are sort of tied into the things we've been discussing about for the last 10-15 minutes. John McCormack, should we activate Alex Vai's clause? Stephen, if we had the opportunity, would you?
I don't believe there is a clause at this moment in time. I'm not sure. I don't know if that came into the discussions, but
would you buy him?
If it was an option just now, I don't see why not. It would very much come into the category that I thought of last season with Bernardo and Ida. So what you could do is you could think, well, there's probably better out there, and then spend the entire transfer window scouring the world looking for something else, and it doesn't work out as well, when really what you could have done is just buy the guy who was right in front of you. That's what I said with Ida. I said, look, $8.5 million or whatever it is, are there better strikers out there for that money? Maybe. But what Celtic traditionally do in that situation is take that £8.5 million and try and spread it across 4 players, and they'll all be garbage and they'll not be as good as Ida. So my philosophy, regardless of how Ida's performing just now, I know that a few people have got a problem with it and he's not scoring enough goals or his first touch looks dodgy, but I'm talking like just generally speaking, I think it is the purpose of these loans is to get a look at these players, and if you're generally happy with what you see, I think it's often safer to go with that rather than just go out and rely on the scouts such as they are. So I'm not blown away by Alex Vai. I think he looks good, but I would probably take him though, because I think he can get better.
Melly, one for you. Alexander Bernabei, would you buy him? Oh no, would you keep him or would you sell him?
Sell him.
That's from David McGarr. Is he worth a second look?
He's sell him. I think if we can get money back for him, I would snap up. Yes, he's doing well right now, but we've seen Bernabei. We've seen what we're getting from him. He's no better than Greg Taylor for me. If it's a choice, on Stephen's question there, if I would buy Vai if Greg Taylor isn't staying, but if Greg Taylor's staying, I wouldn't take Vai. I'd try and find somebody else. Just as I think Vai and Taylor are both better than Bernardo, so Bernabei. So I'm not going back to Bernabei. I don't think that's a good move for anyone. He's found somewhere he's doing well. If Celtic can recoup their money, I would do that right now. He just didn't suit it, and Celtic are going to play an inverted fullback. That's not his game for me. So nah.
The Bernabei situation. He was. We had to let him go in the end. He was rubbish. I think it's one of those weird loans though, because I think the Brazilian league runs in the calendar year, so it'll be up quite soon. I think he might be due back quite soon, so hopefully a deal can be done. But the Bernabei thing, that has been in the news quite recently. It's been in people's attention because I think it was Tim Vickery, who's a South American-based football journalist, was tweeting about how, Celtic might be interested, or Celtic fans might be interested to know that Bernabei is basically running riot over there. And it caused a Brazilian commentator or journalist or whatever to call for him to be called up to the Brazil squad, not knowing he's Argentinian, right? So, so that was on people's minds. What I would say is that it's very unfair to do this to him because it's not his fault. And if you were to criticise him for this, then it would render loans pointless altogether. But the Brazilian league is not very good.
Muck league.
It's a muck league. Glancing at it's never been the strongest league. There's actually quite some quite interesting videos online about it. I think Tifo did a video a while ago about how it's run really badly and players always leave. Players always end up in Europe if you're any good. But it's a bit of a weird league. If you look across it, I know that FotMob had Bernabei top, out in front of their overall ratings. So he was top of the entire league, like 7.75 or whatever average rating for these games, right? And that's very impressive. You can only do that against what you're up against. But looking across the league itself, some of the top scorers include like Hulk. Do you remember him? He's like 39 and all. So the Brazil league is the most you can still find them league in the entire world. Like it's
like
like
Turkey, innit?
Turkey or Saudi Arabia, but even older. Like you guys who were playing the 2010 World Cup and all that are still rattling around. So it's a bit of a weird league like that. That's not to take it away from him, because that's harsh. This is why I've been beating the drum for years about how I wish Celtic would be a bit more selective in the loans that they put players out on, not just get them out for hopeful game time, but put them in a level where you can actually learn something from it. The way that Bernabei strikes me as it was just get him out of here. And we have to remember here that the circumstances of Bernabei's loan was in the middle, so that would have been December. I think he was put out on loan last year, so it was the December, January, because that's when their season runs. He was put out on loan because he was deemed of no value to the transfer, but the title race whatsoever. He was put out on loan, leaving us with one senior left back in the entire squad, and they willingly did that. That shows you what Celtic think of Alexandro Bernabei. But fair play to him, he's done all right out there, but I don't think it affects anything.
No, I think we're kind of seeing with Bernabei perhaps him performing at a similar level, which made him look good, which made us sign him, and then we've sent him back to that level, and we're all saying, oh, he's good again, forgetting that we took him out of that level and brought him to Scotland and he didn't perform. I know we got him from Argentina, but you know, he performed well in Argentina. We signed him. He's not so good. We send him back to the South American League. Oh, wait a minute, this guy's good. And I think if we bring him back, oh, wait, shit, he's actually not as good as we thought. And he shouldn't be allowed in a motor vehicle. Ricardo wants to know what you guys think of the new Champions League format.
I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah,
I think it's breathed new life into the competition. Some teams aren't doing so well, but it's given teams a chance, and it's got very stale for me. Unless Celtic are in the Champions League, I found myself watching less and less games, and you kind of know who's getting to the later stages. This has done it wonders, because if Celtic were playing a team and they get beaten the first game, you pretty much know they're going to get beaten the next game. So you're whittling down your games to playing the team that's your third pot or fourth pot. You're whittling it down to playing those two games. So I think it's been really good. I think it's very enjoyable. It's gave Celtic a chance to not finish bottom of their group every time. I think that gets very repetitive. So I'm loving it. Celtic have done really well in it. We could come in next season if we get in and get a horror draw, but with this way, we've got ourselves into a better fit for it next season, so I'm really enjoying it.
I don't think it's quite peaked yet either. I don't think we're fully used to it. I don't think we're fully on board with how things could pan out. So, for example, I saw there was a viral video doing the rounds maybe a week or so ago where it was Robbie from AFTV, the Arsenal Fans TV, talking about how much he hates the new format. But it was because Arsenal got a bad result, right? So they lost to Inter Milan, and it was... I think he made a decent point, but it was just expressed in a dim-witted fashion. He basically said the whole thing was crap.
What? Really?
But there was a kernel of like truth in there. What he said was that in years gone by, you take a bad one to Inter Milan, but you'd be coming away from the game thinking, oh, see, when we get them back home, that's when we'll see who the real team is, right? And we've not had the opportunity to feel that yet. So, for example, if we were to go away to Zagreb and get a 1-1 draw or something like that, and we're quite disappointed, I think in years gone by you would be thinking, but we'll do them at Celtic Park, and we don't get that chance anymore. That said, that's really the only negative for it so far.
Yeah,
and
really, but then there's a Dortmund game where you go, we could beat 7-1, they're going to spank us again.
Exactly, so it's give and take with that. But it's the only thing I've heard expressed that I thought, I get that. But I think that's the only mild negative to it. What I mean by I don't think we've fully experienced it yet is that I think when it gets to the business end trademark of this group stage, the entire league table, I think it will become very interesting, because it's the first time ever that you could be affected by teams around you who you won't be playing against at all. Yeah. So there's teams above and below Celtic that we have no fixture against who could directly impact what happens with us. That could be negative, could be positive. Likewise, Celtic could send a team out by not playing against them. And I think all that stuff has the potential to be very, very interesting when it gets towards the end of the not group. Yeah, the group stage. I keep stopping myself from saying group because we're not in an actual group. But the league table,
phase.
yeah, the league phase. That's a better way of putting it. I think that has the potential to have a lot going on. Of course, you would probably expect the top 8 teams to be largely, kind of agreed upon by then, and they might pull away. But I think there's so much potential in that sort of 9 to 24. Even potential like relegation, as it were. Like if there are people who could fall out of it through something that happens in another game across the continent. Yeah, I think it could be really exciting there. Hopefully it works out well for Celtic, but that's what I mean by I think we need to let it play out. A lot of people expressing misgivings about the new format, I think probably haven't taken that into account yet about how interesting it can get towards the, as I say, business end.
Melly, Paul wants to know where can we realistically aim to strengthen in January. Now, he's not talking about just picking players for certain positions, but where can we actually improve? If everyone's been fit and you've got your best 11, are there areas there, like so all the first pick, all the managers' first pick 11, are there players there you can realistically improve on, positions you can realistically improve on, or do you think just given what we can afford and who we can attract to Scotland, are we reaching the limit perhaps of this Celtic team? Now, on that second point, I don't necessarily think so. But it's an interesting question. Where can we realistically improve this team?
Yeah, it is interesting that looking at the team, this team that started against Leipzig would probably be our strongest team, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So looking at that, instantly you look to Greg Taylor, maybe Kasper Schmeichel. We're going to need to look at that in the summer, whether he gets a new deal or not.
But can you improve on Kasper Schmeichel in January now? That's the heart of the question.
No, you can't. It's going to be left back improving on two guys who are, I don't know if it's improvement, but you've got two guys at left back who are maybe going to be going. We've found it hard to improve on Greg Taylor over the years. Maybe it needs to be like the summer where we bring in a player of the, say, level of Kuhn when we brought him in, sort of foreseeing him in the future to break into the team. I still think it's that winger slot. Dyson Maeda, love him, love Kuhn. I think somebody that can rotate between them. It doesn't have to be somebody that comes in and take their place. It's going to be difficult to improve on them, but somebody that offers something a wee bit different in there to them. But that's easier said than done.
Okay, so let me just ask you the question again. In January, Martin Melly, when everyone's fit in the best 11 in January, is there one position that you think we can improve on? Don't buy someone in the summer and hope they get better. So do you think left back, Greg Taylor? Do you think we could improve on Maeda? Do you think we can improve on Kuhn?
I would go left wing then. I'll go left wing. I think we can get somebody in that would play as much as Dyson Maeda.
Stephen, that's controversial for me. I think that's a bit of a spicy hot take. Melly thinks we could realistically improve on Dyson. He might be able to improve technically as a player, but for sheer vibes, there's no improvement there.
No.
Having the season of his life as well. Was it 9 goals so far? He's already on course to have his best ever season as he's peaking. So it's a really hard question that I can appreciate why Melly's sort of going round the houses with it.
I need to be strict. I need to be strong and strict. I need to be Anne Robinson here. I honestly couldn't think of another quiz show host. Who's the guy off of the Chase?
Bradley Walsh.
The
mean what? Not fucking Bradley Walsh.
What the one from the Chase? Have you ever seen that clip of the Chase? Not to derail us entirely, which I am doing, but I saw a cracking clip of the Chase the other day where a guy called one of his fellow contestants a maggot. It's absolutely brilliant because he took one of the minus things. So from what I gather, this guy went out, got like...
It's getting heated on the Chase, isn't it?
So this guy went out, got tens of thousands of pounds, maybe 28 grand or something like that, took it back, and the next guy up went and took a minus thing and came back. so he'd lost a load of the money he'd won, and Bradley said something to him about it. He's like, things are getting tense, and he said, I've got nothing to say to them, maggot.
Maggot is so specific.
Incredible TV for prime time, daytime TV. But anyway, my
choices were the Beast, the Dark Destroyer, the Sinner Man, the Vixen, the Menace, the Super Nerd.
Yeah, all named after sex offenders by the sound of it. So it's such a weird nickname selection on that program.
Sinner Man.
The Sinner Man and the Beast. but anyway, so what we're talking about. So you're the Beast. We were
Honestly.
positions.
Right.
I've done it again. Positions for this January. It is very difficult because what we're talking about is identifying probably the weak link and who we can realistically. Now, Kasper Schmeichel is ruled out altogether because despite the fact that he's getting up there in years, even for a goalkeeper, he's pretty old now. He's 38, having just turned 38. So I appreciate that that's going to have to be done, but realistically in January you're going to need to pay an awful lot of money to replace someone who's better than Kasper Schmeichel at this moment in time, and why would you at this moment in time? So I think it is Greg Taylor. I think you could go out, and if you take the approach that Celtic have been recently, let's say we're now in the market for £6.5-7 million players, could you go out and drop that in a left back and be an improvement on Taylor? I think so.
Yeah.
Realistically, with that price point, I don't know if we're getting much better in any other position, because quite simply we've got that in most positions now. Trusty, Carter Vickers, Alistair Johnson was the guts of like 4.5-5 million. Elsewhere we've got Cal McGregor who's not going anywhere. If we're talking about spending £6.5-7 million player on a single player, rather, it's Greg Taylor that is the one who's been improved upon. Yeah,
I would agree with that. Stephen Henderson says, is Kuhn the Frankenstein winger of Celtic wingers? The guy has comparable pace to Maeda, the goal scoring prowess of Scott Sinclair, the technical ability of Jota, and the game intelligence of James Forrest. Also, I don't think I've ever been so sure a player was, as I called him, a non-entity, but has changed my opinion so dramatically. Can you ever think of a player, maybe anyone, that has done that? Perhaps Rodgers.
my one is Stuart Armstrong. I
Did I say that right?
Rodgers, something like that. Although, see, weirdly, in your defence, I'm currently listening to Vince Rugari's book about Ange. So it was on Audible. I thought I had a token sitting there. I'll listen to that. And there's an Australian Australian narrator in that, and he pronounced it Rodgers. I've never heard that before. So
yes,
I don't think that's the problem, that Jamie changes his pronunciation every time.
So we're on Rodgers today anyway.
Yes.
So Stuart Armstrong. Stuart Armstrong is mine. I vividly remember sitting on a very early podcast. It would have been first or second season when we were doing that, and I called him a nothing player because at that time, under Ronnie Dyler, wasn't really pulling up many trees, to be honest. He was kind of floating in and out of things.
No, that was Gary Mackay-Steven you're thinking of. He was.
Yeah.
Oh, quick, isn't he?
He was definitely floating in and out of things, mostly in, it has to be said. But Stuart Armstrong's definitely, I've written off, I've no doubt I've been wrong about many players over the years, but that's the one I was probably most vehemently wrong about, most aggressively, confidently wrong about. I just didn't see it with him at all. But that's another one of those Brendan effects, though, isn't it? He didn't really properly announce himself until he turned up.
Melly, have there been a player that came into Celtic that's sort of been a bit of a non-entity that's completely turned it around for you? I can't think of one that's done it better than Kuhn for me.
Potentially Scales, but I still think there's players that are better than him, so happy to say he's come in and been a good player. Maybe Callum McGregor when he first came through, playing out wide.
Yeah.
I remember we sort of got on board with him quite soon into Ronnie's second season. But at the start, you were like, this guy's a winger with no pace. So maybe him. And maybe Scott Brown towards the end of Ronnie Dyler as well, when Brendan first came in. Even the game against Red Imps, the captain's done.
I was ready for binning him then. Completely done.
I remember doing a match reaction in your house, Jamie, and the three of us were ripping them to shreds. So, I think Scott Brown, but I don't think... I don't think MD's done it as well as Kuhn. You could maybe see things last year, but if push come to shove, you'd maybe go, do you know what, if we can get our money back, take it. But we always said, give him a pre-season, and he's absolutely flying. Like you said earlier, Jamie, it doesn't look like he'll be able to keep this up, but even if he keeps himself ticking along for the end of the season, he'll still had an incredible season. So he's got that pace that sometimes I don't forget, I see how fast he is. We didn't see that last season, and right now you're seeing the sheer pace of him. I still think he's got a lot of improvement to making in his finishing, maybe his decision making to release the ball, but he seems to be getting better at that week on week. So I'm excited to see what more he can give, but I don't think he can find somebody that's done better, had a bigger turnaround there.
No.
Griggs88 says, after Philippe Auclair comments in the Guardian Football Weekly recently about Celtic being one of the best run clubs in Europe, do we as fans go over the top in our criticism when things go bad for a period of time, or is this a case of someone not seeing what's truly under the bonnet? And here's a PS here, but this I won't read it out.
It's interesting that I read or I heard there was a clip put in our Discord of Philippe Auclair talking on the Guardian Weekly. I assume he's still on that.
Football Weekly.
Oh, Football Weekly, yeah. So Philippe Auclair's good. He's a pretty intelligent, good writer in the football space. I've been aware of his stuff previously. He is definitely aware of Celtic because he has written extensively about what we talked about earlier in the murky world of faceless gambling organisations coming out of he's very vocal on that kind of thing and what it's doing to the game and the amount of gambling sponsorship. So Celtic are very much on his radar. And to bring people up to speed who might not necessarily be aware, he said that Celtic are one of the after they beat RB Leipzig, they're one of the best run clubs on the planet just now. And a lot of people will recoil at that because of the many continuous problems we've had with the running of Celtic and the board over the years. But I think two things can be true at once here. I think you can be an outsider and look at Celtic, and as it's put in the question, not looking under the bonnet. I think you can be an outsider looking at Celtic and think they are an extraordinarily well-run club because they are very successful, undeniable, very domestically successful. They appear in Europe, and that might be where the relationship with, depending on how far away you are from the situation, that might be where the relationship begins and ends. You might just see Celtic's name popping up in the Champions League on occasion, and you might just notice a good result here and there. But you look at that, and there's no denying that Celtic are a very well functioning club financially. That's undeniable, right? But you can also be, as a fan who's an awful lot closer to the situation, not completely disagree with Philippe Auclair, but you can say that, yes, all of that said, that leads to frustration from the fans because we don't see it translated into the football side of things the way we would like it to prior to this season. So I think we can all be right on this, including Philippe Auclair. It's very obvious from an outsider to look and go, they're definitely doing something right. But where the frustration comes in for us is that all that money comes piling in, but it doesn't always go to the right places. It's
very difficult to look at something like the transfer window last year, Melly, and say, they're they're well run, and the money that we see as fans come in and out spent on players and players who don't play, and
Marco Tellio, anyone?
Yeah, how did he get in there? So there's I can understand why Philip Auclair or someone from the outside might look at Celtic and go, God, look at the numbers they post and look how well they're doing in Europe and all that sort of stuff. That's very recent. We've seen Celtic, we've been watching Celtic our whole lives, and even in the very recent past, even just rewind the clock back to the last transfer window, rewind the clock back to Ange complaining about how long it takes to get transfers done, and we had a CEO in the door for all the 6 weeks and we get rid of him. These are not the things well-run clubs necessarily do. So I can understand why someone from a distance might look at a snapshot of how well Celtic are performing on a balance sheet and how well we've done the last couple of weeks in Europe. But I think overall, I don't think we deserve the crown as a remarkably well-run club. Maybe we do. I keep seeing other more nerdy people benchmark Celtic against their European peers about how player trade and how much money we are not making compared to them, how low our transfer fees outgoings are compared to them, how often they make Europe in the latter stages of the Champions League, etc., compared to us. And we don't really benchmark very well against teams in and around us. But are our criticisms, are we too hard on that second point, Melly? Are we too hard on the club and on the board when things go wrong? I don't necessarily think so. I think, and I'm not just doing the old Celtic bad thing. Anyone who's listened to this podcast for a while will know that we try and be pretty measured on this, but I think it's when it's went badly for Celtic recently, it's went majorly badly for Celtic, 10 in a row and all that sort of stuff. It was disgraceful the way that panned out in terms of comms from the club and the recruitment and all this sort of stuff. It was an absolute cock shambles, and That's when you get a cock up and you get several cock ups that become a shambles. It's a cock shambles. So I don't think Celtic are.
That can happen to us all. We're all familiar with a cock shambles. Yeah,
Honestly, Melly. So I don't think we're too harsh on them.
It's more for me us holding the club accountable, isn't it? We sit here in the sort of thick of it, week on week, watching your team, and I get that why from the outside you might look at Celtic and go, here they've got a good manager, they won the double last year, they brought in 25 million for a single player, they're winning the Champions League. But if you start to look underneath things, we were a state this time last season. And I think looking at Celtic, to be one of the best run clubs in the world, which he said, if you take Brendan Rodgers out of Celtic, it all falls away.
Yeah.
Just like Celtic got lucky that Brendan Rodgers has
like
an
a pack
affiliation.
of cards.
Yes.
A house of cards and Dave King's nonsense. But as well with that, before that, Ange Postecoglou came in and had to rebrand this club and get us back. So for me, you take away the manager from Celtic, things start to fall apart very, very quickly, and it's why I'll never believe that Celtic are years ahead of Rangers and miles ahead and we're just going to beat them 3-4-0 every season, because the structure's not there for Celtic like it is for other clubs. Other clubs bring in a manager, take him out, put in another one. Clubs like Brighton who are trying to achieve different things to Celtic, but Celtic have got an opportunity to win trophies every season. They should be geared up for that. That should be a given. But in Europe, last season was the first time we won a Champions League game in 10, 11, 12 years. That's pathetic, utterly pathetic, especially for a club that had free run at qualifying for the Champions League for nearly 10 seasons. It's no good enough. I think the facilities at Celtic Park could be much better as well if we're going to be one of the best run clubs in the world. The youth development could be better. The way we sell tickets, simple things, world-class basics, guys, could be better. So I don't think Celtic are anywhere near that. If you were to look at it and glance over it, we might look at Bruges and say they've qualified for the Champions League 5 years in a row. They must be a brilliantly run club without even consulting their fans or anything, or looking into their squad and how they've sold players and all that. So no, I don't think we are. I think we've got a long way to go in that, and maybe that's something Brendan Rodgers can do if he sticks around.
So we're coming to the end. We've got just a handful of questions left. If you want involved in Patreon mailbags like this, okay, we can do that and a lot of other interesting content. Patreon.com/20minute Tims. Okay, here we go. Minty, I was thinking about our Champions League performances so far. Dortmund aside, we've done very well. A large number of players in the squad have been with us for a couple of seasons now. Does this, plus a couple of quality summer additions, highlight our potential in Europe if we're actually allowed to build a squad that stays together for a while? Further to that, would you be disappointed with qualifying for the next playoff round only to exit at the first hurdle? Surely as a minimum we should be aiming for a knockout round win. Two questions there, Martin Melly. Do you think Celtic's potential for success in Europe increases if we keep the squad together? I think the very quick answer to that is probably, but it's unrealistic for us. That's what I think anyway. But I think aiming for Europe, I think for me, just making it past this first phase, baby steps. As you've pointed out, Melly, we've been pretty poor in Europe recently, so baby steps.
Baby steps, yep. If we the way it pans out, we could be sitting there 1 week going up against Brest in the Champions League, and then somebody scores a goal that takes us to play
Dirty
PSG.
Are you?
Come on!
It's because I said baby. Because I said baby, he immediately thought.
That's the first team he could think of.
I know.
I was trying to think of a team, Stephen, that was above
Can't think of one football. Melly's defence here is, I tried to think of a football team and couldn't.
No. My defence is I try to think of a team who's punching right now, who probably should qualify but won't. And so the point is, before you derailed your filth polluting your mind.
Don't want
Look at him,
podcast
Stephen, he's
awards.
rattled. He's absolutely rattled.
Get after him. Say boobs. You don't win podcast awards for filth, as we know.
No.
You've made a tit of me, but anyway. It just depends on the draw. If we get PSG because of the way we finish 12th and they finish whatever it is 24th, then it's going to be very difficult for us. So it'll just depend who we get on. the squad thing, Celtic are in a good position where most of our players have got a long contract right now, and I'm looking at guys like Kyogo, Carter Vickers, Hatate, Maeda. Do I see them moving on? I don't know if Celtic is their level, but that doesn't mean to say it's a bad thing. But with guys like Kuhn, you could maybe see moving on. So I think if we can maybe see one player moving on and then improve the rest of the squad like we did this season with Matt O'Reilly going and bringing in 4 or 5 good players, I think we're at a point where Brendan's built something now. The players can see progress, and hopefully if we keep most of the squad together, make slight improvements or adjustments, we could become a sort of team that does this for the next season, because I don't want to look too much further beyond that.
Just Melly just touched on there, Stephen. The other Berry asked a question in the Discord there. He said, and it sort of ties into Melly's question, would you offer a new contract to, given their age, given how long they've got left on the contract? I think Maeda will be 28 or 29 by the time his contract runs out, and
must be older than that, because I think Dyson's 27 just now, and I think he's got several years left. Yeah,
okay.
so.
I signed a new deal last season.
Yeah.
The reason I got confused was because everyone in the Discord seemingly were arguing about what age he would be in the end up. But the point broadly, Stephen, was given their age.
He's not Finnish. He's Japanese.
Yes.
Yeah.
Would you offer them new contracts given their age and stage?
Yeah, I think so. I think they both look as if they're in really good nick, and I think Kyogo's aging towards 30 now. I think it may even be 30. I'm not sure. Close to it anyway. But yeah, I'd be perfectly happy to offer those guys new contracts. I think that'd be the right thing to do. Whether they stay for the duration of that, unclear. Because as I said earlier, Dyson having the season of his career, everyone's talking about Kuhn, and meanwhile Dyson's kind of putting his hand up and saying, "Here."
Do you know what I often think about Dyson? I often think about what not elderly, but what a mature Dyson Maeda looks like. Because there's no way, with the best will in the world, that Dyson Maeda can be that sort of closing machine at 30 odds. Maybe he will. But
maybe he's just a freak. Maybe he's just genetic.
Even if you take his pace down a level or two, it's still faster than everybody else.
I was going to say, but maybe it's just one of those like genetic anomalies that you do get in athletics. He might just be an absolute machine. But you're right. It doesn't last forever, regardless of your speed. Then, like, even if you do, what you tend to find is it doesn't go away incrementally or rather gradually. It's quite often players just sort of
look at James Tavernier. He just woke up this season and thought, I can't do it anymore.
And there's so many stories like that. There's so many stories from veteran footballers who talk about that game where they realised, I can't do this anymore. It's often it's just a switch for players. But I think that's a long way off just now. I'd be perfectly happy to keep them around. And it kind of goes back to the previous question about the keeping a squad that stays together. To be honest, I think we've already got that. The core of this team has been together for quite a long time now.
It's as good as it's going to get.
Realistically, I don't think we can forget in terms of like 5-6 seasons of the same starting 11 with the odd change here and there, the same core like 15 players. That's never going to happen, and it doesn't really happen for any teams. So when you look at the team just now, we've got Callum McGregor, who's been there for years. Cameron Carter-Vickers is in his 4th season. Same with Kyogo. These guys have all been here a long time, kept together the sort of spine, if you like, or the core. Alistair Johnston, a veteran player. Greg Taylor's been here 5 years now.
Talk of a new contract for AJ, of course.
Yeah, I definitely get that done. But I look at the team and think, actually, that is kind of a well kind of stuck together team for several years now. I don't think, as you say, I think it's unrealistic for us to think of like keeping players for the main players for any longer than about 2 or 3 years. But again, previous subjects we've talked about, it's up to Celtic to get better at mitigating that, to get better at replacing players. So I'm perfectly happy with the way the squad. I don't look at it and think, this is just a pure transient team that you can never really get behind because players come and go. I don't feel that at all. I think we've had plenty of the seasons out of these guys so far, and they look set to continue that. Even if Kyogo were to go at the end of this season, that's 4 years for a really top striker that we've had. That's about as good as you're going to get these days. Perfectly happy with that.
So we have the final 2 questions. The first question is from Tom Donnelly. He says, is Lennon Miller worth 5 million, or is this board trying to avoid another John McGinn? On the face of it, I think Lennon Miller's a good player. I think he's the sort of player that we've spoken a million times on the podcast about Celtic being the filter for these players. I think £5 million is fair enough, given how much we paid for David Turnbull from the same club some years ago. I think if you're paying David Turnbull money for Lennon Miller, I think that's a good deal for Celtic. It doesn't even reflect
for Greg
much.
Taylor, something as well from Kilmarnock. So that's
It doesn't even reflect much in the way of transfer inflation, does it, Stephen?
No, I think that's the ballpark you're in now. For the top talent in Scottish football who is playing well and dominating games, £5 million I think is absolutely fine, because we can't. Obviously, Celtic need to continue to be clever and be very smart and prudent with their money, as well as pushing the boat out on occasion. I don't think we can have our cake and eat it too much. I don't think we can expect to take away the premier talent in Scottish football outside of Scotland, or outside of Celtic rather, and expect to pay 1.5 million for him. Because what I would say about that is that, see, if Celtic do think he's worth 1.5 million, don't sign him. You know what I mean? He's got,
brilliant point.
Aye. So if that's truly the level you think he is operating at as a 1.5 million player, that puts him in with a number of duds that we've picked up for that price point.
So true.
So as I say, that would be a perception from our point of view. If you think he is like a potential generational talent coming from Scotland and could go into Celtic's midfield for years to come, pay $5 million for him. I would have no problems with that whatsoever. Because I think, Jim, you said recently, I think we can forget this thing that he'll come and just no play ever. Yeah. I think he'd definitely play games for Celtic. Not necessarily every single minute of every single game. He's still young, but he would definitely get games here and there. So I'd happily pay $5 million for him.
Melly, you're a big fan, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of him. I think he could be a really good player, and he's at an age where he's 18 years old. He's already starting games. Like, Celtic don't have MD doing that right now. They don't have MD near that age. It seems to be a lot further down the line. I'm no sure. He's been getting moved around a lot because he is such a good player, and I think Motherwell are trying to get him further up the pitch, but I maybe see him as more of a number 6. So if Celtic can get him in, get him playing games in one of the number 8 positions and then the odd game in the number 6, so that long term it's progression that he could become into Cal McGregor's position over the years. He's going to need more rest. He's not going to be able to keep this up, and I think long term we need to look at that. I don't want to bring in a player who's just a number 6, and then we've seen it with Kouassi and Iwata, who just don't play because Callum McGregor's going to play. But excuse me, if we can bring in somebody flexible who can play a bit further forward, and as he learns can learn to play that position coming back, because I think he's got the power in there. He just maybe lacks a bit of pace, and I've heard that's why English clubs aren't looking at him. So if we can have him in that number 6, I think that's the position where the pace will be the least worrying thing for him. So I think that's his position long term.
Right, here we go. Final question, and it's a ratings round. Celtic signed 8 players in the summer, and Christopher wants you to rate them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read out a name, and if you think he's the worst player, you rate him number 8, and if you think he's the best player, you rate him number 1.
Is it one of those like blind ranking things that they do to players?
We're going to move some people.
Right, okay. So here we are. Sinisalo, Melly.
Number 8.
Yeah.
Stephen.
Yes, agreed. Number 8.
Luke McCowan.
Is he coming in at 7?
It's blind ratings, I can't tell you.
I can't think of who else have signed here.
I'll go 6 for him.
I'll go 6. Yeah, I'm happy with that then. Yeah.
Kasper Schmeichel.
1.
It could be slam dunking in at number 1 for me. I'm happily putting 1. We had this discussion quite recently, didn't we? Arguably the most important signing of the summer.
Arne Engels.
Number 3.
So,
okay. Paulo Bernardo.
4.
5.
5. Okay, right. Oh no, did we put McCowan?
No, we've not had him yet.
You had McCowan second. I read Luke McCowan's name and you rated him 6th.
6,
right, okay, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, Adam Ida.
4.
Yeah. I kind of forgot about Ida. Ida hasn't maybe lived up to some people's expectations, but I think he's done all right. I think he's got 5 goals or something like that. A couple against Bratislava. It's not been as completely fruitless as has been made out. Maybe not great recently. Didn't look too clever against Kilmarnock, but what I would say in an argument to that is that he did have his nose smashed in within the first
do
few
it.
minutes of the game. Yeah, that'll affect you, right? So I don't think he has been as bad. I've not got the same issue that others have had with either so far, but I've completely forgotten the run of this table right now. So I think he's up there. Have we already got a 4?
Mm-hmm.
So we've already got a 4.
Boys, I mean, it really, we had to remember,
We've
right?
no visual aid here.
I know.
Just saying
Got
names and
nothing,
numbers.
just memories.
Right, okay.
If we get
Right.
Trusty still to go,
Yeah.
Yes.
right. So
Have him now.
Right, 2, I would say.
I'd actually agree with that.
Yeah, behind
And-
Schmeichel. No, I
Yeah, and Paulo Bernardo probably in the middle there.
thought we already had Bernardo. I can't remember now. I'm certain we had Bernardo. I said 3, I think.
Do you know what? Do you know
What
what
a
we'll
great
do?
segment.
Yeah. Do you know what? We'll just tell me your best and tell me your worst.
Do you know what we'll do? We're going to scrap the previous hour and 20 minutes. Just put that out as the podcast. Right? Just that section. Right. Best. I nearly said Peter Schmeichel. Best Kasper Schmeichel.
Easily.
Worst Sinisalo because he's not played. Right.
You're not having
So-
Sinisalo because he's not played, so I need another name because that's a cop out, Stephen.
Right.
Come on.
So we're doing 7 then. So
5.
it's got. Yeah. It's got. Oh.
Five.
See the worst.
Aye.
Can't
Aye,
interest you in
so-
Arnie Engels?
Nah, bye.
Nah.
Nah. Okay, there we go. And on that confusing bombshell cluster.
Brain shell.
I know. On that confusing cock shambles, we shall wrap up this Patreon mailbag. Thank you so much to everyone who submitted questions. Thanks to you guys, obviously, for continued support on Patreon. We really appreciate it. And thank you for all of you who caught this later on the flagship feed. International Week ends, and we will be back with a normal run of things very, very soon. Thanks for listening.